side of things as they shut down for the next 5 weeks and we go into a 4th of July holiday. If you see me over in Dundalk, yeah, that's me yelling at the Kicks band. And the Orioles are out on the West Coast visiting Seattle as well as Dodger Stadium, one of my favorite places, early part of next week. But in the meantime, there are other teams giving chase to the first place Baltimore Orioles. And as you know, I haven't had a chance to say first place Baltimore Orioles very often in the summertime, but I got a guy here who's chased a few first place teams. He does all things sports in Boston at Fox 25 and WFXT, and you can follow his journey out on Twitter or at fox25boston.com. He is Tom Lydon, a defending champion and a guy who may have some reasonable doubt about the 2016 Red Sox. We'll soon find out. Tom, what's going on, man? Happy 4th to you, my friend.
I appreciate that. Hope everybody's enjoying the weekend. Hopefully the weather is going to cooperate with everybody and get a hot dog and a hamburger and a drink of your choice and settle in and enjoy some company with your family.
You know what, man? I'm looking at your Twitter. So my wife is from Manchester, New Hampshire. So she's Red Sox. You know, we did this ballpark tour last year, did 30 ballparks in 30 days. And I mean, I've been to Fenway 1,000 times. I prefer Fenway to Wrigley. She prefers Wrigley to Fenway. I don't know. But that picture you have on your Twitter, that is the quintessence. I've never sat in that seat. I've never sat down the third base line at Fenway. That's a real nice shot of the Prue building you got going on there, man.
No, it is. That's what you get. You get the view of the skyline when you sit over there. You don't get the picturesque view of the monster, obviously, when you're sitting on the third base side. So you got to soak it up for, you got to go a number of times.
That's a different angle is what that is. I like what you presented there for me.
Sit someplace where you're blocked by a pole. That's part of the experience at some point. You got to do it. And then when your kid looks at you and says, Dad, these seats stink, you got to say, somebody sat in this seat in 1913. Shut your mouth.
You know how lucky you are to be at Fenway Park?
Exactly.
Yeah. You're lucky they didn't rip this down and build some mall here like they did in New York. For the Red Sox, we've seen so much of them. I remain impressed by everything about David Ortiz at this point and the Red Sox offense, but clearly this has been kind of a bad week, and that distance the Orioles now, the first-place Orioles, are putting between them, and I'm shocked by it, but I got to think in Boston, they spent a lot of money in the offseason to make sure this didn't happen.
Yeah, they certainly did, and it is surprising when you look up at the standings and see Baltimore in front as much as they are, because you figured it was going to be nip and tuck the whole way. And I still think ultimately that it will be nip and tuck, but it's going to take both teams kind of cooperating with each other in that regard, because the Red Sox have gone on a hot streak, but even when they were on their hottest of streaks, the Orioles were right there. So that gave me pause for concern right away, because, the Red Sox were playing as well as I think they can play, and Baltimore was right there. So I flipped the question and say, what's it going to take for Baltimore to come back down to earth? Because maybe there weren't as great expectations for that team to be as good as it is right now. I think the Red Sox can play better, but it's hard, even this early in the year, to start yanking that competition in. And then you ask yourself in the rearview mirror, is there anybody who's going to make a push from underneath? Toronto's a good team with the postseason experience from last year. Are the Yankees dead? You'd probably think yes.
I hope so.
Tampa's been terrible. So I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to go down to September.
For me with the pitching, as an Oriole fan and a guy that watches that, I never feel confident. Tillman maybe, Gausman maybe. The rest of it is an absolute box of chocolates. Jimenez has no business being in the rotation. They're allowing him to be in the rotation. And meanwhile, and it's because of the money and the veteranness, meanwhile, the Red Sox have taken Rodriguez, which we all have angst about here, and sent him back to have more options to be moving guys around. The Orioles don't have those options. They're going to throw Jimenez and Gallardo out there, and we're just going to see the Red Sox are moving chairs around a little more rapidly at this point.
Yeah, there's no question. And, you bring up Eduardo Rodriguez, and that name can't be mentioned up here without Andrew Miller being in the same sentence because of that trade. And I know that there was some trepidation from the Baltimore side of things with the potential that Rodriguez had when he was traded and still has, because I think it's there. But the whole concept of him tipping his pitches and now at this point just losing confidence is a major issue. And for him to go out against the Rays the other night and get absolutely shelled, down and get that thing fixed. Rodriguez, since he got hurt in spring training, now hopefully is going to be applied to, hopefully the Red Sox go out and get a pitcher from another organization, because it's becoming abundantly clear that anybody who they bring up from Pawtucket isn't ready to contribute at the level that they need an extra arm to contribute. This team is incomplete. The pitching staff is what it is, with players that some of them are overpaid, Clay Buchholz, Rick Porcello. But Rick's been doing all right. You know, Rick goes out the other night and gets a win against Tampa Bay when the team needed him to get a win. So they need to add an additional willing to give up. Dombrowski's history is such that he typically gives up more from the farm than most general managers. That's how he gets those deals done. You can point to his track record and say, you know, he gets stuff done, but he's willing to part with some of the young talent. And that hasn't been the norm here in Boston over the last decade. So I'll be curious to see how people respond as July 31st approaches, when Dombrowski starts giving up the farm to get an arm who can help this team right now.
Tom Lydon joining us here from Boston at Fox 25, up there talking some Red Sox. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Tom Lydon. That's spelled Leyden. He's got a beautiful picture of Fenway Park out on the front of his Twitter. He's also 25boston.com. You said overpaid, and you can rattle off the names of the overpaid guys. I mean, the Panda is overpaid and is getting a paid vacation, right? It's amazing how much money the Red Sox and the Yankees can waste and still stay relevant. Meanwhile, teams like Toronto and the Orioles have generally looked the other way on all of that. But for the Red Sox going into the market, they have more to deal from the minor league system than what the Orioles have right now. The Orioles would love to have another pitcher, no doubt about it. They have nothing on the farm to give up. They have nothing to bring up at this point.
It's going to be interesting because I really do think it's going to be minor league guys who are prospects. And there are some that may be still a year or two away. And it's going to be, truly, you use the phrase sometimes, we're going to go inside baseball. It really will be an inside baseball kind of trade where there are people that the average fan may not know that much about who go the other way, whose scouts will be drooling over. This team has to win now. It's got that short window, most notably with Ortiz in his final season, but it's constructed to win now. You don't go out and spend the millions of dollars that the Red Sox have spent and anticipate finishing in last place like they did in 2015 and 2014. This is a team constructed to compete in the postseason, to win in the postseason, and be right back where they were in 2013. As you'd expect, unlike in Baltimore, I'm sure, there's a lot of questions about whether or not the guy who's calling the shots is going to be there throughout the whole season, which is a little bit amazing when you consider that they're in second place right now. But John Farrell, after two last-place finishes, is every day on a hot seat, and he kind of rides the ebbs and flows based on how the team performs on a nightly basis. And it didn't help that last year when he wasn't here, God bless me, came back from the cancer and his health is good. But when he wasn't here, the team really did respond to Torey Lovullo. So Torey was kept as the bench coach, paid probably more than many other bench coaches around the league. And he's sitting there as that manager in waiting. And whenever the team starts hiccuping, as the team has hiccuped throughout June, the chatter begins, and the chatter gets a bit louder about, is Farrell the guy? Is he going to be able to take this team to where it needs to be? What's the breaking point? What does it take for him to lose his job? So very tenuous situation for a guy to try to keep his employment, but it speaks to the urgency of the 2016 season.
But it also speaks to Boston, dude. I mean, I'm down here in Baltimore where the media is neutered. I had my press pass taken away 10 years ago, that there is no chirping. If the Orioles into a tailspin, it wouldn't be Buck's fault. You know what I mean? Like, it just wouldn't be. That's just the way it kind of rolls around here. It would be the bad pitching, and it would be Jimenez's fault or Gallardo's fault. The guy holding the ball would be responsible. To some degree with the Red Sox, I don't know that you're expecting more out of Betts or Bradley or Bogaerts, and certainly not out of Ortiz. I mean, those guys have all had sort of career incredible years, and Pedroia's holding on pretty nicely as well. You can't get any more out of your star bats than they've gotten out of those bats. I mean, imagine if Sandoval had any sort of influence at all and just was mostly as good as he was in San Francisco, which is a middling player to begin with. If they were getting that kind of contribution as well, even Ramirez could be better. They could be better in the second half, but, Farrell's going to have to answer for that if they're in third place.
And you know what? You touched on it without even saying it. The guys who you didn't mention are the pitchers. And this is where Farrell is hurt because
he's the pitching guy, right?
So if he's the pitching coach and he's supposed to get these guys in line, what's going on there? Why can't he get his pitching staff to respond? Why are they consistently struggling early in games? Why can't they come in there and shut down an inning after the offense goes up there and puts 4 on the board? I mean, that's a problem. That shouldn't be the case. If there's any strength that this manager has, it should be getting that pitching staff in shape, and it hasn't happened. So that's why, among other reasons, he's always in the crosshairs.
Oh, I talk to a lot of people about baseball, and everywhere I go, somebody has spent a lot of money on someone for the most part because there's a lot of money to spend. In Baltimore, we talk about Jimenez and Gallardo being wasted money. Various days, Chris Davis and how he's performing. But David Price has to stand in the middle of all of this because you pay for him to be an ace, to be a guy every fifth day that's giving you the ultimate chance to win. And we're out in Seattle this weekend, and they fall apart when King Felix goes away. When you're paying a guy $200 million and he comes in and has an ERA of 5, he's got to be held accountable as well. If Farrell loses his job, David Price and Sandoval and some of these guys would be a big part of that as well.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think that there is certainly a level of patience with David Price because the track record proves as such that he's not going to stay in this sort of swoon that he's begun his Red Sox career in. What's most interesting to me is that they get a guy like Stephen Wright, and Stephen Wright throws that knuckleball. And they didn't expect him to perform as he's performed. But
he's the savior, literally, right? If you would have said back in March, that knuckleball kid over there, we don't even know what the hell he is going to be going to the All-Star game, and he's going to be the reason we're in second place. Boy, and if you would have said, well, Big Papi's going to have 20 bombs again and going to be hitting 340 at the All-Star break. I mean, they've had some good luck, really, along the way here.
But here's the deal. You can't count on Wright performing well in the postseason. No fault of his, but as the weather gets colder, and we've seen it in some starts where it's drizzled or it's been cold, he's ineffective. His pitch doesn't move. The knuckleball is almost non-existent. So everybody in the back of their head is saying, wow, this is pretty scary because you got a guy who is pitching well here in the heat, but you kind of can't count on once we get to October. So the rest of these guys better get in line. So I think that there is some rope with David Price, without question. And who are they going to go get? I do think you're going to see a top-notch, legitimate number 2 pitcher acquired by the Red Sox before July 31st.
Yeah.
And it's going to shake the foundation of the team for sure because somebody's going to be going the other way, whether it be an Andrew Benintendi, who was their first-round pick last year, Yoan Moncada, who is doubtful to go, who's probably their biggest stud in the minor league system right now. He might be going the other way. Blake Swihart was a big trade chip until he slammed into the wall in left field and really injured his ankle, came pretty close to breaking his ankle. So I don't know that someone's going to hop on that train and trade for Blake Swihart. There's going to be a big name leaving this organization in July, and I think it's going to make people say, oh, this trade better work. It's going to be a lot like the Andrew Miller trade. Well, this trade better work. It's going to be a little different because they're going to go get a proven guy as opposed to getting an up-and-coming prospect. But it'll be, I can't wait to see what it's going to be like. They're going to get somebody. They're going to make some moves.
And I don't think the Orioles are going to run away and hide, but I could be wrong. I mean, the one thing the Orioles have done, they've had 3 full weeks now, Tom, where they haven't lost. During the course of the first half of the season, they've had a week a month where they've been perfect. And, that really starts to add up when you're putting together the 5s, the 6s, and the 7s in a row.
And they've been very effective against Boston. Every time that the two teams have played, it's been Baltimore who's done a really good job, except for that one series back in the middle of June, which was the one that was played up here in Fenway Park. Baltimore has seemingly had the Red Sox number, and that gives you reason for concern as the season progresses too, because if these games are going to come down to head-to-head, and Red Sox against Orioles as the season winds down, you'd like to have some success head-to-head against that team that you're going up against, and we haven't really seen that throughout the course of the season so far. I mean, scoring as many runs as they did down in Camden Yards at the beginning of June and walking out of that series having only won 2, that's a good indication of how the Red Sox season and the Orioles season has gone. They gave up a ton of runs, they scored a ton of runs, and it's like, yep, need better pitching.
Tom Lydon joining us here. He is lead sports anchor at Fox 25 in Boston, and we're monitoring all things Red Sox. But, man, you got plenty going on up there, right? I mean, the Celtics are trying to throw money around like a drunken sailor. If Tom Brady will be back in the news before it's all over with, and we'll be kicking the football off, and Belichick will be scowling at you more in a couple of weeks, right?
It's coming. This is the time of year that the players get out real quick and hopefully stay out of trouble, and they report back for duty at the end of July. There's, as always, heavy expectations, not only in Baltimore but up here. And with the cloud hanging over this franchise of whether or not Tom Brady's going to start those first 4 games, once again, a little bit like last year, but even more serious this year, there's a lot of attention on Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can just guess what the daily conversations are like. How many reps did they get in practice? Are they going with Brady as the first-team guy? Is Garoppolo practicing with the first team? That's the number one drama. But don't forget what cost this team in the end last year. It wasn't the guy under center. It wasn't anything except for the guys up front. So I think the biggest move that the Patriots made was bringing back Dante Scarnecchia to coach the offensive line. They're going to get their two bookends back in Vollmer and Solder, who they didn't have at 100% towards the end of last year. And I think that the offensive line is going to be much improved from what it was. That was really the Achilles heel. But they got some interesting guys. Terrence Knighton on defense this year. They went out and got Chris Long. So they got contract situations coming up with Jamie Collins and Dante Hightower and Malcolm Butler. So those are the topics that are pretty regularly discussed when you're talking about the Patriots as 2016 gets set to begin.
Yeah, and, if the biggest prank of the summer turns out to be the Gronkowski-Brady hand-in-the-water thing, if that's the big news, that's not such bad news, right?
No, it's funny, Gronkowski, we talk about this a lot. The best thing about Gronk is that he's obviously so good on the field, and he has such a great time off the field in so many different ways. He has his parties, he does his commercials, he's on the new show that he's hosting. And I don't think anybody's bothered by that because he keeps his nose clean. It's a much different story than a Johnny Manziel who goes out and parties. And the big criticism about Johnny Manziel is that, he parties too much. You know what? Gronk likes to party too. The difference is that Gronk gets completely focused when it comes to his performance on the field, and he's the best tight end of the generation. So that's a gift that this organization has, and I don't think they expect much from him when it comes to, they don't need him to be the spokesman for the team. When Gronk talks, it's typically funny. He kind of has that meathead to him, and that's okay. He's very intelligent, I think, and he plays that role brilliantly. And when he gets on the field, he's unstoppable. So this team, very fortunate to have a guy like him for sure.
I prefer to think of him in the meathead role, and when I've dealt with him, he has played the role of the meathead, which is just where we want it, because we're coming up there in December. Why do we always play up there? I know in the playoffs, I get that, but, it just feels like Tommy and Billy don't come down here as often as we'd like for them to,
Yeah, no, I hear that. That'll be interesting. It'll be a Monday night game in December. Weather's going to be an issue. Should be fun. I just hope both teams are going to be all right. The Ravens going to have enough practices under their belt before they get here? How can they break that rule? Come on, what's going on down there?
I didn't even cheap shot about the murders or the cheating or the deflated buy. I didn't do any of that. I just come doing the first place, second place baseball thing, and you've got to go there, right? Hey, man, I hope you have a great summer and enjoy your cookout up there. And certainly for my wife's family, the Red Sox were unbelievably kind to us last year on our tour, and we're hoping to get back to Fenway at some point, get a Fenway Frank and some chowder and a nice cold beer, and maybe some of these September games will hold up and be really big, right? A little chilly 45-degree Red Sox-Oriole game in September would be kind of cool, I think, right?
I'm right there. You'll see me there. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you, man.
All right, be good. Have a good
There
week.
he goes, Tom Lydon, doing all things sports up in Boston and stirring it up as the Boston media does at Fox 25 and WFXT. You can follow him at Tom Lydon. That's Leyden up in Boston, Fox 25 Boston. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net anytime, anywhere. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.